Welcome back, night listeners, to Nakora Nights. California isn't just beaches and big cities. Drive far enough, and you'll find towns so small, so quiet, so unnervingly still, you start wondering why anyone still lives there, and sometimes you wonder if they're even alive. Tonight we're exploring 10 true California small-town horror stories, real encounters from forgotten communities hidden behind deserts, forests, and old highways. A town where every house had lights on, but no faces in the windows. A gas station that disappeared from the map the next morning, and a neighbor who waved every night at the exact same time, even after he died. These aren't ghost stories to scare kids. These are the moments people witnessed and never spoke of again. Before we step inside these silent towns, tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Because if it's late, some towns don't like being remembered after dark. If you're brave enough to continue, hit like, subscribe, and comment below. I've been to a town like this. Now, keep your car running, don't roll the windows down, and whatever you see on the side of the road, don't stop. This is 10 Untold Most Disturbing True California Small-Town Horror Stories. Let's begin. I always believed silence had a sound, a faint hum hiding in the stillness, waiting to remind you that you're never really alone. Maybe that's why I started noticing it the moment I reached the small town on the edge of Los Angeles, where the streets were quiet and the fog rolled through every night like a slow-moving ghost. My name is Ross, 32 years old, a freelance photographer who had lost his grip on both work and sleep. I used to cover city lights and street portraits, but after my divorce, my eyes couldn't find beauty in faces anymore. A friend told me about an old house on the outskirts of Los Angeles County, near the hills past Sunland, that needed someone to check on it for a few days. It belonged to a retired couple who had gone up north, and they wanted a caretaker for the weekend. I thought a few nights away from the city might help me clear my head. I had no idea I was driving straight into something that didn't want to be left alone. The house wasn't big, just an old single-story cabin-style home built in the 70s, surrounded by dry trees and a quiet dirt road that curved for miles before it reached the main highway. It looked forgotten, with its wood panels dark from rain and a garage door that hung unevenly. I parked my car, unlocked the front door, and stepped inside. Dust floated through the light coming from the small window. The air smelled like cedar and something faintly metallic. I dropped my bags in the bedroom and went to start the small heater. The quiet pressed against me from all sides, heavy and thick. I liked it at first. It felt peaceful, a kind of silence I hadn't heard in years. I made some tea, sat on the small couch, and told myself this was good. That night I slept early, with the wind brushing the trees outside and the faint creak of the old house reminding me it was still breathing. When I woke the next morning, I noticed the garage door was open. I froze for a few seconds, thinking maybe I'd forgotten to close it, but I remembered clearly turning the lock before bed. The cold air moved through the opening, scattering dry leaves into the garage. I walked out slowly, my boots crunching against the gravel. The latch wasn't broken. The padlock hung loose, as if someone had opened it gently. I looked around the yard. Nothing. Just the trees swaying, the sky still pale from dawn. I locked it again and went back inside, brushing it off as a wind issue. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. By noon, I set up my camera near the kitchen window, pointed toward the garage. I thought maybe I'd catch whatever was happening. That night, after dinner, I replayed old photos on my laptop, half trying to distract myself. At 2:17 a.m., a sound jolted me awake. A faint metallic clang from outside. I crept to the window and my heart dropped. The garage door was open again. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. My breath turned white in the cold. The beam cut across the driveway and stopped at the footprints. Two sets of prints led away from the garage, across the dirt, straight toward the back fence, but there were no return prints. Whoever had walked there hadn't come back. I followed them slowly, feeling my stomach twist tighter with every step. The prints ended near the fence, where the dry weeds were pressed down. I shined the light into the trees, but there was only darkness and silence. No sound of movement, no wind, just the stillness that seemed to watch me breathe. When I went back inside, I locked every door and window, dragging a chair under the doorknob of the bedroom. I didn't sleep. The next morning, the garage was open again. I checked the camera. The video showed everything until exactly 1:49 a.m. Then, the screen went black, just static for 3 minutes, and when the picture returned, the door was open, swinging slightly. The timestamp kept running like nothing had happened. I stared at it for a long time, the coffee in my hand gone cold. That evening, I drove into town, just 15 minutes down the hill, and bought an extra padlock. I also asked the shopkeeper about the house. He looked at me strangely when I told him the address. "You're staying up there?" he said, frowning. "That place has been empty for years. The couple who owned it passed away last spring." "You sure you've got the right house?" I left the store with a chill in my chest that had nothing to do with the weather. When I got back, the garage door was closed. The new lock fit tightly. I told myself I'd stay just one more night. At 7:45 p.m., I sat near the window, trying to write something in my journal, when I saw a faint shape by the fence, a person standing still, not moving, facing the house. I turned off the lamp and crouched, staring through the blinds. The figure didn't move for a full minute. When I finally blinked, it was gone. I didn't go outside. I stayed awake until dawn, heart pounding with every creak of the floorboards. When I finally stepped out in daylight, the footprints were there again, fresh, leading up to the porch. That was the day I decided to leave. I packed my bags and loaded them in the car. As I drove down the dirt road, I reached a red light on the edge of town. My heart was still racing from the sleepless night. The cars were quiet around me, the morning sun just beginning to burn through the fog. That's when it happened. A man leaned close to my car window. His face was pale, his breath fogging the glass as he whispered, "Why did you change your home address?" Then he turned and walked between the cars, vanishing into the traffic. I froze. My foot pressed on the brake, my hands trembling on the wheel. The light turned green. Horns blared behind me. I couldn't move. I drove straight to my apartment in the city. When I reached home, I went straight to bed, barely remembering to lock the door. My body felt like stone, my mind foggy with exhaustion. For the next 2 days, I didn't leave my apartment. On the third day, there was a knock on the door. No one I knew ever came by unannounced. I hesitated, then opened it. A small cardboard box sat on the floor, wrapped in brown paper. No label, no return address. Just my name scrawled in black ink. Inside was a single photograph. It was me, a child, maybe 6 years old, standing in front of a house that I didn't recognize. But it wasn't the photo that made my stomach twist. It was what was written on the back. It said, "You've been here before." I stared at the photo, my pulse thudding in my throat. The edges were yellowed, the paper soft with age. But there was something else behind the child in the photo. The garage door of the house was open. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the man at the traffic light. The whisper, the footprints. I tried to tell myself it was all coincidence. Maybe I was just losing it after months of stress. But deep down, I knew something had followed me. At midnight, I woke to a sound from the living room. The faint creak of the floor. Then a slow dragging sound, like something being pulled across the rug. I got out of bed and listened. My breath caught when I realized it wasn't just noise, it was footsteps. I reached for my phone, but the screen stayed black, no signal, no light. I stepped toward the door, my hands shaking. The noise stopped. The air felt heavy, pressing against my skin. When I reached the living room, the box from the parcel was on the coffee table. I had left it on the counter. The photograph was gone. Then I heard breathing. It came from behind the couch. Shallow, uneven breathing, as if someone was trying not to be heard. I backed away, my throat dry, eyes wide. The breathing stopped, and then, in the dark reflection of the TV screen, I saw movement. A figure standing just behind me, its head tilted slightly, as if studying me. I turned, but there was nothing. Just the empty room. I grabbed my keys and ran out the door, not even locking it. The street outside was empty, silent except for the hum of distant traffic. I sat in my car, gripping the wheel, trying to steady my breath. I drove aimlessly for hours. through the city lights, through the fog, until I found myself back at the same dirt road I had sworn never to see again. The turnoff that led to the old house. The moon hung low, pale against the hills. I don't remember making the decision, but somehow I was walking up the road again. The air felt colder, the silence heavier. When I reached the house, the garage door was open. Inside, the camera I had left behind was sitting on the ground, the red light blinking. I picked it up with trembling hands and pressed play. The footage showed me sleeping in the bed. The timestamp said 1:48 a.m. The door opened slowly, and a figure stepped inside. Tall, thin, moving wrong, like each joint bent the wrong way. It stood at the edge of the bed, just watching. Then the video ended. The camera fell from my hands. I ran out of the house, stumbling across the dirt, the air burning in my lungs. Behind me, I heard footsteps, slow, steady, following. I didn't look back. When I reached my car, I locked the doors and started the engine. But the headlights flickered. The radio turned on by itself. Static filled the speakers, then a voice whispered through it, soft and broken. "Why did you come back?" The lights went out. When I woke, it was morning. I was parked in the same spot, engine cold, sunlight spilling through the windshield. I didn't remember falling asleep. I drove straight home, not looking in the mirrors. The apartment felt different when I returned, colder. The air didn't move right. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw that open garage, the footprints, the man's whisper. A week later, another parcel arrived, no name this time. Inside was another photograph. Me, standing outside my apartment. The picture had been taken last night. The handwriting on the back was the same as before. It said, "You never left." That night, I unplugged everything, turned off every light, and sat in the dark. The sound came again, slow breathing just behind me. I didn't turn around. The air felt heavy, pressing closer, like something unseen was leaning over my shoulder. My chest felt tight, my skin cold. The breathing grew louder until it was right next to my ear. Then, silence. I waited for it to return, for anything to happen, but nothing did. I sat there until dawn, frozen, the first light spilling across the floor. I don't know if what followed me was a person, a spirit, or something else entirely. All I know is that silence still has a sound, and sometimes it whispers your name when you're alone. Now, every night, I hear the garage door creak open, even though I live on the 7th floor. I never planned to be out there that night, but some choices feel small until they start echoing in ways you can't escape. My name is Tony Morrison. I've been an auto mechanic in San Diego for nearly 10 years. My days usually smell like oil and rust, and my nights are quiet, spent fixing the things people think are beyond repair. I've always liked the peace of it, the rhythm of turning a wrench and knowing exactly what's wrong. But the truth is, I was tired of the noise of the city, the sirens, the street lights, the endless hum that never lets you think. Every February, since before the pandemic, my best friend Caleb and I would take a short camping trip into the mountains east of San Diego. It was our escape, just two guys, a tent, and snow that swallowed every sound. We'd always gone to the same place, near a small frozen lake not far from Julian, where the pines bend over the trail like gates. That winter felt colder than usual. I remember leaving the shop late, my hands still smelling like gasoline. I picked Caleb up from his apartment, and we drove out of the city as the last lights disappeared behind us. The world turned pale and quiet. The only thing moving was the snow under our tires. By the time we reached the forest, the sky was already dark. We set up camp beside the lake, pitched 2 small tents, and built a fire that glowed against the snow. The air smelled like pine and smoke. Caleb handed me a beer, said something about how nobody else was crazy enough to camp in February, and we laughed. It felt normal, comfortable. At around 7:45 p.m., it started. A scream tore through the distance. Long, raw, and human, it echoed through the trees, bouncing until it sounded like it was coming from everywhere. My body went stiff, the can freezing in my hand. Caleb jumped from his chair, staring into the dark. The sound faded. The woods fell silent again, like nothing had happened. Caleb said it had to be an animal, maybe a bobcat. I wanted to believe him, but the scream had something deliberate in it, like whoever it was wanted to be heard. We waited, listening, but nothing came. Time passed slowly. The fire cracked, the wind moved the branches, and for a while, we managed to calm down. Then, just when I started to think it was over, the scream came again, closer this time. It sounded like someone was just behind the lake, maybe 50 feet away. Caleb cursed under his breath, grabbed his flashlight, and looked at me. I nodded. We couldn't just sit there pretending nothing was wrong. We bundled up, grabbed our knives, and headed toward the sound. The snow crunched beneath our boots, every step sounding too loud. The beam from our flashlight cut through the trees, revealing only flakes of snow drifting down. Then it came again, sharper, desperate. We followed it until the lake disappeared behind us, maybe 30 feet deep into the forest. I stopped, holding my breath. The woods were too quiet. Even the wind had stopped. I turned to Caleb, but before I could say anything, something screamed again right behind us. We spun around. The flashlight flickered, shaking in Caleb's hand. For a second, I saw something between the trees, something tall, too pale to be an animal, too still to be human. Then it was gone. We stood frozen, waiting for it to move again. The snow muffled everything, even our breathing. Then Caleb stepped forward slowly, eyes locked on the ground. He stopped and pointed. Lying there was a deer carcass, half buried in snow, its neck torn open. Blood soaked into the ice, still steaming. Before I could say anything, Caleb tapped my shoulder hard. I looked up. There was someone standing on the other side of the trees. No jacket, no shoes, just a thin shirt clinging to his body. His skin looked gray, his eyes dark and wide. He wasn't moving, just staring. Caleb whispered for us to go. I couldn't look away. The man's head tilted slightly, the same way you'd look at something you didn't understand. We backed up slowly, step by step, until we could no longer see him through the trees. Then we ran. By the time we reached the camp, my chest was burning. We didn't speak. We just grabbed our bags, kicked snow over the fire, and threw everything into the truck. The engine barely started, but when it did, I didn't stop driving. We didn't talk on the way back. Not once. 2 days later, Caleb stopped answering my calls. I figured he needed time, that maybe the whole thing shook him worse than me. But then, things started happening. I live in Chula Vista, in a small house near the edge of the bay. My nights are usually quiet, except for the occasional car passing by. But one night, around 2:17 a.m., I woke up and noticed headlights through the blinds. A car was parked across the street, engine running. It stayed there for 3 hours. When I finally stepped outside to check, the car was empty, the engine still warm. The police came, said maybe someone left it running, but I knew better. The smell in the air, the same cold metallic scent from the forest was there. A week later, I got a call from the naval base near Point Loma. They needed help with a few vehicles in one of their off-site storage garages. It was decent money, and I didn't want to think about the trip anymore, so I said yes. When I got there, fog rolled in so thick you could barely see the water. I started working, checking engines and changing oil. Around 6:40 in the morning, I noticed a man standing outside the fence, motionless, like a statue. He was facing the base, muttering something under his breath. When I got closer, I realized he was whispering names, dozens of them, one after another, like he was reading a list. He didn't blink, didn't move. I called out to him, but he didn't respond. When I turned to get one of the guards, he was gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I booked a cheap room at an old hotel near downtown San Diego, just to get away from my house for a bit. The building looked tired, faded carpet, flickering lights, the kind of place that smelled like time had stopped paying attention. At 1:22 a.m., I woke up to a scraping noise coming from behind the wall. Slow and steady, like nails dragging against the plaster. It went on for almost a minute. I sat there in the dark, counting the rhythm of it. Then it stopped. I turned on the lamp. The wall looked normal, but there were small, wet footprints on the carpet, bare feet. leading from the bathroom to the door. The door was locked from the inside. I called the front desk. The guy on duty didn't sound surprised. He said old buildings make strange noises. When maintenance came up, I helped move the furniture, and that's when we saw it. Inside the drywall, dusty footprints pressed into the insulation, like someone had been walking between the walls. I checked out immediately. The next morning, Caleb finally called. His voice sounded different, strained, distant. He said he'd been hearing the same scream at night, outside his apartment. Said he'd seen a man standing near the dumpsters, staring up at his window. I told him to stay inside, to call the police, but he hung up before I could finish. That was the last time I ever heard from him. When I went to his place a few days later, the lights were on, the door locked. The landlord let me in. Everything was there. Wallet, keys, phone, but his jacket and boots were missing. His laptop was open on the table. The screen showed a folder labeled Lake. Inside were photos. The first few were of our trip, snow, tents, the campfire. But the last one made my stomach twist. It showed the two of us standing by the fire, but behind us, between the trees, there was a figure. Pale skin, dark eyes, torn clothes. I closed the laptop and left. Since then, the nights haven't felt the same. I started hearing things again, a low cry from somewhere outside my garage, footsteps behind me when I'm locking up. One night, I turned around and saw a reflection in the window. A man standing just behind me. I spun around, but no one was there. Last week, while working late, my security camera picked up something outside. It was 2:17 a.m. The same car that had followed me months ago pulled up across the street again. This time, the door opened. A figure stepped out. It was Caleb. Or something wearing his face. His skin looked wrong, his movements stiff. He walked toward the garage, but when the motion sensor light came on, he vanished. I checked the footage over and over. At the end of the clip, there's a frame that shouldn't exist. Me, standing at the workbench, and behind me, Caleb, smiling. The timestamp says 7:45 p.m. The same time we first heard the scream in the forest. Now I don't sleep much. The whispers outside my house have turned into voices. They call my name over and over, like someone's rehearsing it. I've seen handprints appear on my car windows in the morning, small and pale. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still see the lake, the snow, the man across the clearing. I keep telling myself it's all in my head. But every photo, every sound keeps dragging me back to that night. And sometimes, when the wind picks up just right, I can still hear it, the scream echoing through the cold, calling me back. I kept driving because stopping felt worse. My name is Rickleton, and last December I was not doing deliveries. I was working nights as a mobile locksmith in San Jose, the kind of job where you meet people at their worst moments, locked out, angry, embarrassed, and you fix the problem fast, then disappear before they remember your face. It was the day before Christmas Eve, and the city felt strange, like everyone was pretending to be happy while something cold watched from the corners. I had been on the road since afternoon, helping strangers get back into cars, apartments, storage units, anywhere a key could fail. I told myself I would take one more call and then go home, because my hands were tired and my head was full of noise. At 7:45 p.m., the next request popped up. Cabin-style home, keys locked inside, customer waiting. The distance was the first red flag. The pin was far out, past the normal neighborhoods and closer to the hills where the roads get thin and the trees get tall. I almost declined, but the night had been slow and I needed the money, so I accepted. The drive started calm. The air was icy and wet flakes drifted down, not real snow, more like cold dust that melted the second it touched anything. Streetlights became rare, then gone. My headlights were the only bright thing cutting tunnels through the dark. The quiet felt peaceful at first, then it started feeling like the world had paused for a reason. All week, weird little things had been piling up, and I kept trying to ignore them. 2 nights before, I helped a woman outside an apartment complex. While I worked, she stared at her phone like it was dangerous. She told me her phone always started recording by itself whenever she drove past the nearest intersection to her house. She said she would stop at the light, her screen would wake up, and there would be the red dot, audio recording like somebody had pressed the button. She showed me a list of audio files, all starting at that same intersection, all ending when she turned into her street. She looked exhausted, like she had been listening to them at night, hoping to hear something that explained it. The next morning, I ran into a jogger near a small park. He looked nervous, kept scanning around as if he expected someone to step out from behind a tree. He told me an unknown number texted him every morning with comments about what he was wearing. He said one message read, "I'm wearing a blue jacket today. It looks good." He was wearing a blue jacket when he told me that. He tried to laugh, but his face stayed pale. He said he changed routes, changed times, even ran with friends, but the message still came like somebody always knew. And the day after that, in a parking garage downtown, I found a deep handprint on the hood of my van. Not a smudge, not dirt, but a print like pressure, fingers wide, palm heavy, like someone had pressed down hard and held it there. The garage had cameras. The security guard checked the footage. Nothing showed. 1 second my hood was clean, the next second the handprint was there, as if it arrived without a person. I told myself those things were separate. I told myself, people are weird, tech glitches happen, cameras miss stuff, and my brain was making patterns because I was tired. Then the map voice told me to turn onto a narrow path through trees. It did not look like a real road, just a thin strip of dirt and crushed leaves, barely wide enough for my car. The branches leaned inward like they wanted to scrape the roof. I slowed down, heart tapping harder, but the pin was straight ahead, confident, like this was normal. At the end of the path sat a small cabin-like house. One porch light burned weakly. The windows were dark. There were no other cars, no signs of a party, no holiday decorations, no neighbor houses visible, only trees, thick and close, swallowing the light. I parked and killed the engine. The silence hit immediately, heavy and deep. Even my breathing sounded loud. I grabbed my tool bag and stepped out. The cold bit my face. The wet flakes touched my cheeks and vanished. The porch boards creaked under my boots as I walked up. I knocked. At first, nothing. Then I heard chatter inside, loud, crowded, full of laughter, like a holiday party packed into a tiny space. Voices overlapped. Someone sounded like they were telling a joke. Someone else laughed too long. I heard clinking, like glasses tapping. It was so lively that my brain froze because the cabin looked too small for that many people, and the windows were dark, and there were no cars outside. The sound also felt wrong. That is the part I struggle to explain. The laughter did not breathe. The voices didn't rise and fall like real conversation. It felt looped, like audio playing from a speaker down a hallway. I knocked again. Footsteps approached slowly, measured, not rushed like someone who is locked out and frustrated. The door opened. A man stood there in the dim light. He was tall, middle-aged, wearing a sweater that didn't match the weather. His smile appeared instantly, like a mask dropping into place. His eyes were focused on me too sharply, like he was measuring me, not greeting me. Behind him, the hallway was mostly dark. I did not see anyone moving. No warm glow, no people passing by, no coats tossed on chairs. Yet the loud party chatter continued somewhere deeper inside the cabin, like a room full of guests just out of view. I said I was the locksmith, and I asked where the customer was. The man smiled wider and said, "Come in, bring your bag inside. They will be happy to see you." That sentence made my stomach tighten. People don't talk like that when they are locked out. They don't say they will be happy to see you, like you are a guest they have been waiting for. I tried to stay calm. I told him I could handle the lock from the porch. I just needed the person who requested the service to confirm their name, then I would work. He stepped back, opening the door wider, like he wanted to pull me inside with the space itself. He said, "They want to thank you for working during the holidays. You will be glad you stopped by." The chatter kept going behind him, loud enough to feel like it should spill out into the doorway, but the air at the door felt dead, like the noise was trapped inside walls. I looked at the hallway again, expecting shadows, movement, anything that matched the sound. There was nothing. No smell of food, no warmth, no shifting crowd, only darkness and that impossible noise. I felt my hands go cold even inside my gloves. I took a small step back, the porch board creaking. The man's smile stayed, but his eyes tightened, like he didn't like me moving away. I said, "Sorry, company policy. The client needs to meet me at the door. I can't enter without them present." He did not answer my words. He just stared at me, smiling, like my rules were a joke and I was the only person who didn't know it yet. Then the chatter stopped. It cut off instantly, like someone pressed stop on a recording. Silence slammed into the space so hard my ears rang. For the first time, the man flinched, his smile twitched. He glanced over his shoulder toward the dark hallway, and in that quick motion I saw something real cross his face. Worry. Not worry about me, worry about whatever had been making that noise. He turned back too fast, smile snapping into place again, and he took one step forward like he was going to close the distance and end the conversation. My body moved before my brain finished thinking. I dropped my tool bag on the porch like it was poison, turned, and ran. The porch boards creaked behind me. I didn't look back. I sprinted through wet dirt to my car, yanked the door open, threw myself in, and locked it with shaking hands. My keys almost slipped. I started the engine, headlights blasting the trees, and backed up so fast my tires skidded. I drove down the narrow path like something was right behind me, even though I never saw anyone chasing. The trees flashed past, branches clawing the air. The map voice kept talking calmly, turn left, continue, like nothing had happened. I didn't slow down until I reached a main road with other cars and real streetlights. I pulled into a gas station, bright and loud, and sat there gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles hurt. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. The message said, "You ran fast, but you left your bag." I stared at the screen, trying to convince myself it was a prank, trying to figure out how anyone would have my number that quickly. My phone buzzed again. Another message. "I'm wearing a blue jacket today. It looks good." My throat went tight. I wasn't wearing a blue jacket. I was wearing a black hoodie. That made it worse because it meant the message wasn't about the jacket, it was about being seen. I looked around the gas station, at the people, the cars, the cameras, the bright windows. Everything looked normal, but my skin felt like it was being watched from somewhere just outside the light. I drove straight home and didn't take another call that night. For the rest of the holidays, I stayed inside with the blinds closed. I kept telling myself nothing happened, because technically nothing did. No one touched me. No one chased me. No one dragged me into that cabin. But my mind kept replaying the cut-off chatter, that sudden stop, like a tape ending. A few days later, my dispatch app emailed asking why I never completed the job. When I opened the details, the address was gone, blank. No street, no number, no pin, like it never existed. I checked my map history. The route was missing. I searched the area on satellite view. Trees, hills, empty green patches, but no clear driveway, no cabin, no porch light. I told myself it was a glitch, another glitch, because that was the only explanation that didn't make my hand shake. 2 mornings after Christmas, I walked out to my car and froze. There was a deep handprint on the hood, darker than the last one, clearer, like someone had pressed down slowly and meant it. The fingers were long. The palm looked heavy. It sat right in the center like a mark of ownership. I went to the apartment manager and asked to see the camera footage. He pulled it up on his screen. It showed me parking the night before. It showed the hood clean. Then at 2:17 a.m., the video glitched for a single second, the image tearing like a broken signal. When it came back, the handprint was there. No person appeared. No shadow moved. No door opened. The mark simply existed, like the world rewrote itself in that one missing second. I stopped doing locksmith work after that. I told people it was stress, that I needed a break. That was true, but not the whole truth. Sometimes when I drive at night, I pass certain intersections and my phone vibrates in my pocket, even when it is on silent. I check it and there's nothing, no calls, no texts, no alerts. But once, late in January, I drove past an intersection I didn't recognize, and my phone screen lit up without me touching it. The recording app opened. The red dot appeared. It started recording. I pulled over shaking, hit stop, and played it back right there on the side of the road. At first, it was only my breathing and the soft tick of my turn signal. Then, faintly, under everything, I heard crowded laughter, overlapping voices, clinking glasses, a holiday party packed into a space that shouldn't hold it, and a man's voice, smiling too close, saying, "Come in, they will be happy to see you." I deleted the file, but sometimes I still swear I hear it in the quiet, like a party that never ended, just waiting for the moment to press play again. I never told anyone the full truth about that night because I knew they would smile and say I was just tired. My name is Jordan Hale, and back then I worked nights at a tiny family-run market in a quiet Northern California town called Driftwood Bay. It was the day after Christmas, and I still do not understand why I was scheduled. The store had been closed for Christmas, the day shift was usually slow after the holiday, and there was almost nothing left for me to stock. But I showed up anyway, alone, under harsh white lights that made every aisle feel longer than it was. For the first hour, I did the little work I could find. I pulled a few items forward, filled a couple of empty spots, and fixed shelves that looked messy from the last rush before the holiday. After that, there was nothing to do. Time got thick and heavy, so I just wandered, trying to look busy, trying not to think about how quiet the building felt when it was supposed to be asleep. While I was walking past the front windows, I saw someone outside standing way too close to the glass for that time of night. At first, I thought he was just passing through the lot, maybe cutting across, but he stopped when he noticed me. Instead of leaving, he stepped closer, slow and steady, like he was being pulled toward the window. He did not knock. He did not wave. He did not ask for anything. He just stared at me, face blank, eyes locked, like he was studying me. My stomach tightened. I felt small, and I hated that I felt small, but I did. The man stayed there, close enough that I could see his breath fog the glass. After a few long seconds, I turned away and walked off, forcing myself to act like it meant nothing. I was trying to play tough, but inside I was thinking, no normal person does that, not at this hour, not at a closed store. I waited a little, then went back to look. He was gone. I let out a shaky breath and told myself I was overreacting. So I went back to pacing the aisles, straightening labels, fixing rows, doing tiny tasks that did not matter, just to fill the night. Minutes passed, maybe more, and the calm started to come back until I rounded the corner at the end of one aisle and stopped dead. Several heavy boxes were on the floor, scattered like someone had shoved them down. These were not small items that could fall by accident. They were big cartons, the kind you have to lift with both arms. They had not been like that earlier. I stared at the mess, trying to make sense of it, trying to explain it away. Then I heard a sound from the far end of the aisle, a laugh. Soft, deep, and wrong, like a grown man trying to giggle quietly like a kid, like he was hiding and having fun. The sound came from just around the corner, close enough that if I stepped forward, I would be right there with him. For one breath, I thought about confronting whoever it was. But my mind jumped back to the man at the window, and I imagined what someone big in a thick jacket could carry. A blade, a tool, something sharp. My fear hit hard, and it told me to run. So I did. I backed away fast, then turned and sprinted toward the front. I shoved through the doors into the cold night, jumped into my car, and called the police with hands that could barely hold my phone. I kept staring at the windows, expecting a face to appear, expecting movement in the dark. The officers arrived a few minutes later, lights flashing across the empty lot. They went inside to search while I stayed outside, hugging myself, breathing too fast. They checked the aisles, the storage areas, the back rooms. They found nothing. That made my skin crawl because I knew what I heard, and I knew those boxes did not fall on their own. One officer asked about cameras, so we pulled up the security footage in the office. And that is when my fear turned into something heavier. On the screen, we saw the man outside the window. Then we saw him move along the side of the building, staying close to the wall like he knew where the cameras were weak. He reached a side door and forced his way in. He slipped inside like a shadow, quiet, steady, not rushing. He walked the aisles slowly, not grabbing money, not stealing anything, just moving like he was looking for me. Then he went to the aisle with the boxes and knocked them down on purpose, one by one, like he was setting a trap. He crouched near the corner and waited. When I walked toward that aisle on camera, he shook with laughter, that same low, eerie giggle, and in his hand he held a small folding knife, a switchblade that flashed under the light when he moved it. He was so close to me on that video that I felt sick, because I could see how easily that night could have ended differently. The officer said he was probably not sober, maybe drunk or high, and that could explain the strange behavior. But I did not care. Not being sober does not make a knife less deadly. It does not make a person less dangerous. I quit the night shift after that. But the story did not stop when I left the store. A few days later, I drove down to a bigger place nearby, a coastal city called Seacliff, to clear my head. I ended up riding a tourist cable car for the first time in my life, just to feel normal again, just to be around people and daylight. Halfway through the ride, a stranger sat close to me even though there were other seats. He smelled like damp clothes and old smoke. He did not smile. He did not introduce himself. He simply pressed a small piece of paper into my palm. On it was an address. He leaned in and said in a flat voice, "It will be for you tomorrow." Then he stood up and stepped off at the next stop like he had never been there. My heart hammered. I stared at the paper, then stared after him, but he vanished into the crowd. I wanted to throw the paper away, but my fingers would not let go. It felt stupid, but it also felt like a warning, like a hook had been set in my skin. That night, I did not go to the address. I stayed inside and locked my door. At 2:17 a.m., I woke up to a sound that did not belong in the dark. A child crying, faint but clear, like it was coming from under the bridge near the water. The crying was slow and steady, the way it sounds when a child is tired and scared. I got up and listened. The worst part was how real it sounded and how wrong it felt, because Driftwood Bay is the kind of town where you would notice a child outside at night. I looked out my window, but the street was empty, and the sound kept coming, floating up from the direction of the bridge. The next day, I asked my neighbor, a woman named Tessa Rowan, if she had ever heard anything like that. She went pale. She told me that almost every night she hears a child crying from under that bridge, but when she asks anyone else, they swear they hear nothing. She said she tried to follow the sound once, and it felt like it moved ahead of her, always just out of reach, like it wanted her to keep walking deeper into the dark. After that, I stopped going near the bridge at night. Then something else happened. I went to Seacliff again, this time walking through the old downtown area where tourists love to wander. I passed through a busy block of shops and ended up in a crowded district people call Old Lantern Row, full of narrow streets, bright signs, and little restaurants. I stepped into a public restroom to wash my hands, and I was alone inside. When I looked up at the mirror, my breath caught. My name was written on it, Jordan. The letters looked fresh, like someone had traced them quickly and left. I spun around, expecting to see someone behind me, but there was no one. No footsteps, no door creak, no movement at all. I wiped the mirror hard until the letters faded, but my hands were shaking. I walked out fast, feeling watched, feeling like the air itself was staring at me. After that, paranoia became my shadow. I started checking locks twice, then 3 times. I kept lights on in rooms I was not even using. I avoided empty streets. I jumped at small sounds. And the worst part was how my mind kept tying everything together, like invisible string pulling every weird moment into the same knot. The address on the cable car paper, the crying under the bridge, my name on the mirror, the man in the store with the knife. Different places, different faces, but the same feeling, like someone was playing with me. One evening, at 7:45 p.m., I stopped at a gas station on the edge of town. The clerk was in the back, the store was quiet, and I was alone near the drink coolers. The front window reflected the fading sky, and for a second, in the glass, I saw a figure standing outside behind me. Too close. Just like before, I turned fast. No one was there. But when I turned back to the window, I saw a faint fog mark on the outside of the glass, like someone had breathed against it and then wiped it away. I backed up, pulse roaring in my ears. I drove home and did not stop until I was in my driveway, and even then I sat in my car for a long time, staring at my front door like it might open on its own. I never found out who the man in the store was, and the police never called to say they caught him. Maybe he moved on. Maybe he forgot it all the next day, but I did not forget. Because sometimes, late at night, when the town is silent and the fog gets thick, I swear I can still hear that low, quiet giggle in my memory, right around the corner of my mind, waiting for me to look. And I still do not know what would have happened if I had tried to be brave in that aisle, because on the security tape, the knife in his hand looked small, but the way he held it looked certain, like he had already decided how the night was supposed to end. I never liked big celebrations. I was the kind of person who preferred silence over chaos, small talk over shouting. But every New Year's Eve, somehow, I got dragged into things I didn't want. That year was no different. My name's Noah, born and raised near Fresno, California, a small, quiet town surrounded by fields and distant hills. Most people here knew everyone else, which made it harder to say no when friends invited you somewhere. My buddy Kyle was hosting a New Year's Eve party at his parents' old ranch house on the edge of town. He was the one with the money, the friend who had a big place, a wide yard, and a barn that could hold half the neighborhood. Kyle and I had been close since high school, though life had taken us in different directions. I worked long shifts at a hardware store in town, barely making rent, while Kyle was the kind of guy who somehow always landed on his feet. That night, he called and said, "Come on, man, don't be boring." It's New Year's, so I gave in. Kyle's friend Travis picked me up around 9:30 p.m. The drive to Kyle's place took about 20 minutes, passing empty fields, long stretches of dark road, and quiet farms where porch lights glowed faintly through the fog. When we arrived, the house was already thumping with music. There were maybe 30 people there, not wild but loud enough to feel alive. Laughter echoed off the wooden walls, drinks clinked, and the smell of barbecue mixed with cold night air. I tried to enjoy it. I really did. We played drinking games, took shots every time the host made a joke, and when the ball dropped at midnight, everyone screamed and hugged like it was the end of the world. For a few minutes, I forgot how much I hated parties. But around 2:17 a.m., the buzz in my head turned into a pounding ache. I wanted to go home. I searched for Travis, but he was passed out upstairs, face buried in a pillow, shoes still on. Kyle was too drunk to even stand, and the few guests left were in no condition to drive. So, I stepped outside and opened the Uber app. The cold air bit into my face as I sat on the curb at the end of the long gravel driveway. The night was quiet, eerily quiet. Kyle's house sat far from the main road, surrounded by trees that whispered when the wind passed through. The app said my ride would arrive in 10 minutes. I wrapped my jacket tighter, rubbed my hands together, and tried not to think about how the world around me seemed too still, too dark. A thin fog had started to roll in from the fields, stretching like fingers across the road. After what felt like 5 or maybe 10 minutes, headlights appeared through the mist. A black sedan slowed near me, the driver's window rolling down. A man leaned out slightly and called, "Uber?" I nodded and stood up, stumbling a little from the alcohol. He smiled faintly, and I climbed into the back seat, shutting the door behind me. The air inside smelled faintly of cigarettes and something sweet, like old cologne. The driver was maybe mid-30s, short dark hair, thick beard, eyes that seemed heavy but watchful. "Big night?" he asked as he pulled away. "Yeah, something like that," I said, leaning back. I didn't want to talk, just wanted to close my eyes and drift off until I got home. The road ahead stretched out like a ribbon of black glass. No sound except the tires crunching on gravel and the faint hum of the heater. Then my phone buzzed. I opened my eyes and saw a notification from Uber. My stomach twisted. It said, "Your driver has arrived." The pickup location was Kyle's house. A message followed, asking where I was. I froze. I looked up at the man in the driver's seat. He was watching me through the mirror, eyes cold, unblinking. Something inside me screamed to get out, but I forced myself to stay calm. Maybe it was a glitch, maybe I'd somehow clicked something wrong. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I leaned back slowly, pretending to close my eyes. Then I noticed. He wasn't heading toward my neighborhood. He was driving deeper into the countryside, where the houses turned into barns and the barns into trees. The clock on the dashboard glowed 2:36 a.m. When we reached a small intersection, the light turned red. I saw my chance. As the car slowed, I yanked the door handle and jumped out, hitting the pavement hard. My knee scraped, pain shot up my leg, but I ran without looking back. The sound of tires screeched behind me, then silence. When I turned around, the car was gone. I stood there shaking, breath burning my throat, surrounded by the endless dark. My phone still showed the real Uber waiting at Kyle's house. I texted him that I wasn't coming and started walking toward the faint glow of the nearest streetlight. That was supposed to be the end of it, but it wasn't. Over the next few weeks, weird things began happening. It started small. A missed call from an unknown number around 2 a.m. Then, one night, a voicemail appeared. I pressed play expecting static, but instead, I heard slow breathing. A man's deep breath, long and deliberate. And in the background, faint but clear, was the creak of my back door. I froze. I lived alone. I checked the door locked. Checked the windows closed. I tried to tell myself it was a prank. Someone from the party maybe, but the calls kept coming. Always after 2 a.m. Always the same sound. Sound. Breathing. Waiting. Then one night, I woke up to a thud outside. My heart nearly stopped. I crept to the window, peeled back the curtain just an inch. There were muddy handprints on the glass. Small ones, child-sized, but too high for any kid to have reached. Each print perfectly shaped, like someone had pressed both palms, slowly, carefully, against the pane. The next morning, they were gone. A few days later, my neighbor, an older woman named Mrs. Sember Dorsey, knocked on my door holding something in her hands. It was an old photo album covered in dust, edges frayed like it had been buried for years. "I found this in the basement," she said. "Your landlord said this house used to belong to a family from the 70s. Maybe you'd like to see." Curious, I opened it. The photos were old, faded, but my breath caught when I reached the middle pages. There, among the smiling faces of strangers, was a picture of me, standing on the porch of this same house. Wearing the same jacket I was wearing now, my hands went cold. The photo looked recent, yet the edges were cracked, yellowed like it was 50 years old. I didn't remember taking it. I'd never seen that photo before. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak, every whisper of wind made me jump. Around 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Another voicemail, the same breathing, but this time, there was a whisper. A man's voice saying softly, "You shouldn't have left." I called the police. They searched the area, checked the locks, told me it was probably a prank. But I saw the look in the officer's eyes. He didn't believe it was nothing. After that, I started noticing shadows in the reflection of my windows, faint shapes that moved when I stayed still. I'd wake up to the faint sound of gravel crunching outside, as if someone was pacing near the porch. One night, I decided to stay awake and watch. At 2:01 a.m., my phone lit up again. Unknown number. I didn't answer. But outside, headlights appeared, stopping in front of my driveway. A black sedan. It idled for a moment and slowly rolled forward until it was just in front of my porch. The driver's side window lowered, but I couldn't see his face, only a silhouette, watching. Then, just as slowly, it drove away. The next morning, I found fresh tire tracks in the dirt, leading toward the old field behind my house. I followed them halfway, but they stopped suddenly. No turnaround, no footprints, just ended in the middle of the field. That's when I started remembering small details from that night. How he looked in the mirror, the way his eyes didn't blink, the way the air in the car felt too cold. It didn't feel human. A week later, I packed a bag and planned to move. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, but the night before I left, I heard a soft tap on my window. Then another. When I turned on the light, the handprints were back fresh, wet, sliding slowly down the glass. I ran to the door, locked it, backed away, heart pounding. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to answer, but something in me had to. When I lifted it, there was a live video call request from an unknown number. I pressed decline. It rang again. I declined. It rang again. Finally, shaking, I accepted. For a moment, the screen showed static. Then it cleared. It was my own living room, but the camera wasn't my phone's. It was like someone else was filming. I saw the couch, the lamp, and then me, sitting on the floor, phone in hand, staring at the screen. I dropped the phone. It hit the floor with a crack. The call ended. I grabbed my keys, ran outside, jumped into my car, and drove. I didn't stop until I reached the city lights far from that house. I didn't even notice until later that there was something on my passenger seat. A photo, the same one from the old album. Only this time, the version was different. In this one, I wasn't standing alone on the porch. Behind me, partly hidden by the doorway, was the driver, his pale face barely visible, eyes fixed directly on the camera. The next morning, I called Kyle. He said no one else from the party had ordered an Uber that night. Travis didn't remember me leaving. The official Uber record said my ride was canceled at 2:20 a.m. Whoever picked me up wasn't from the app. I moved to another town after that, closer to the coast, thinking I could leave it all behind. For months, things were quiet. Then one night, my phone buzzed at 2 a.m. A voicemail. I pressed play, and there it was again. Breathing. Long. Deep. And faintly behind it, I heard a whisper. "I found you." The next morning, my apartment manager called. They said the security cameras had caught something strange. At 2:13 a.m., a car had parked in the alley behind the building. A man got out, stood facing my window for exactly 6 minutes, then left. They couldn't see his face. That evening, when I came home, there was dirt on my window. I wiped it clean, and underneath, faintly visible in the reflection, were 2 small handprints. I checked the locks. I checked under the bed, the closet, the bathroom. Everything seemed normal. But as I stood in the hallway, something caught my eye, a small shape under the couch. It was the old photo album. The same one I'd left behind in Fresno. I picked it up with trembling hands. It fell open to a page I hadn't seen before. It showed my new apartment, my window, and through the glass, that same dark figure standing outside. I threw the album into the trash and sat on the floor shaking. That night, I didn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed again. I didn't look. I turned it face down and tried to breathe. The buzzing stopped. But then, a soft tapping began on the window, slow, steady. When I finally looked up, I saw him, standing just beyond the glass, the fog of his breath spreading across it. And on the misted surface, he slowly drew a single word with his finger. Ride? I'd always loved quiet weekends, the kind where I could rest after long workdays, cook something warm, and sit by the window listening to the faint city sounds. It was the first weekend of February, and the cold air hung over Sacramento like a gray blanket. I worked at a local repair shop, nothing fancy, just enough to get by. The job kept me busy through the week, so I had been looking forward to these 2 days off. I lived alone in a small 2-story house at the edge of town, close to an old park where hardly anyone walked after dark. Everything felt normal that Saturday morning. I made coffee, scrolled through my phone, and cleaned up a bit. The day passed quietly until sometime in the middle of the afternoon when I heard a dull thud from upstairs. It wasn't loud, just one sharp sound like something heavy had dropped. I froze for a second, listening for another noise, but there was nothing. I thought maybe a shelf had fallen, or the old pipes had made a noise again, but I had never heard that exact sound before. Curiosity got the better of me, so I went upstairs to check. The air upstairs felt a little cooler. I walked from my bedroom to the spare room, looked under the bed, opened the closet, checked the windows. Nothing. The house was still and silent. I shrugged it off, figuring it was nothing important. For the rest of the day, I didn't think about it again. That night, around 9 or 10, I was sitting on the couch, half asleep, while the TV played some movie I wasn't even watching. Then it came again, the same thud, same place, same weight behind it. My eyes opened wide, and I stared up at the ceiling. I hesitated for a second, then stood up. The floor creaked beneath me as I walked to the stairs. I took each step slowly, my heart beating faster even though I told myself it was silly. Upstairs, everything was in place, quiet. I opened the door to the spare bedroom again. It was empty, like always. The window was shut. The air felt still. Maybe a raccoon on the roof, I thought, or maybe houses just make weird noises. I sighed, went back downstairs, turned off the lights, and went to bed. The next morning, sunlight crept through my curtains, and I rolled out of bed feeling groggy. I went downstairs to make coffee and breakfast. While I moved around the kitchen, a small thought began to scratch at the back of my mind. Something felt off. The cereal box was in the wrong spot. The chips were tilted sideways. The sugar jar looked slightly closer to the stove. I didn't remember moving them, but maybe I was being forgetful. Still, that uneasy feeling stayed. I stood there staring at the pantry for a full minute. Nothing seemed truly wrong, but everything felt different. I told myself not to overthink it, that it was probably me being tired. The day moved on slowly. I did laundry, cleaned the living room, and watched TV. The uneasiness faded as hours passed. By evening, the sky turned orange over the rooftops. Around 7:45 p.m., the last sunlight disappeared behind the park, and I turned on a small lamp in the corner. I was just about to sit down when I heard it again. The thud. Same tone, same spot. I froze. My body reacted before my brain did, standing up automatically. I walked to the stairs, trying to stay quiet. Halfway up, I heard another sound, a faint click. It was so soft I almost thought I imagined it. My chest tightened. It sounded like a door latch. I climbed the rest of the steps and stopped at the top, listening. My bedroom door was open, dark inside, everything quiet. Then I looked toward the spare bedroom. The doorknob gleamed faintly in the hall light. I reached for it and turned. It moved halfway, then stopped. Locked. From the inside, my stomach dropped. I stepped back slowly, staring at the handle. My breathing got shallow, heart hammering against my ribs. Someone was inside. I didn't want to believe it, but the lock couldn't turn by itself. I backed up another step when I heard movement behind the door. A quiet shuffle of feet, then another click. The handle turned slightly, and the door creaked open an inch. I didn't wait. My mind went blank. I ran down the stairs so fast I nearly tripped, grabbed my keys from the counter, and bolted through the front door. I didn't stop until I reached the end of the street, panting under a streetlight, my hands shaking. I called the police, stuttering as I told them someone was in my house. They arrived within minutes. I watched from outside as flashlights moved through the windows. After a while, one officer came out and said they didn't find anyone. But in the spare room closet, they found grocery bags, an old blanket, and half-eaten food. Someone had been living in there, probably for days. Maybe longer. Even writing this now, it makes my stomach twist. Thinking how close that person had been to me every night, walking around while I slept, watching me from the shadows. After the police left, I couldn't stay there that night. I went to a friend's apartment on the other side of town. I didn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. For the next week, I stayed somewhere else, checking my house only during the day with officers. The locks were changed, the windows sealed, but still, I felt watched. The thought wouldn't leave. 3 days later, I went back to grab more clothes. The house was cold and silent, but as I walked through the living room, something caught my eye on the wall. It was a small symbol scratched into the paint above the couch. 3 crooked lines, almost like claws. I didn't remember it being there. My heart sank. I checked the hallway, another symbol, faint but there. On the kitchen counter, one more. I called the police again. They said maybe it was there before, maybe I hadn't noticed, but I knew better. Someone had marked those. Every morning after that, I found a new symbol somewhere else, on the doorframe, the table, even once on my car dashboard. I wiped them off, but they kept appearing, one each day, like a countdown. At night, I began hearing faint steps above the ceiling, slow and dragging. I convinced myself it was paranoia, but one evening, I set up a small camera facing the stairs to feel safer. The next morning, when I checked the footage, 13 minutes were missing from around 3 in the morning. The screen went black, then came back on. I stared at it for an hour, rewinding, fast-forwarding, but it was just gone. I replaced the batteries, set up another camera. The next night, same thing. 13 minutes vanished. I couldn't understand it. I didn't hear anything, didn't wake up. I started sleeping in the living room, facing the door with a flashlight beside me. Some nights, I swore I heard someone whisper from upstairs, just my name, soft and drawn out. The neighbor next door, Mr. Lewis, an old man who rarely spoke, came over one afternoon to check in. He said he'd been hearing strange noises too, like talking at night, but he thought it was his TV. Then he said something that made my skin crawl. He said sometimes, around midnight, he heard someone calling my name from behind his backyard fence. He thought it was me. When he'd call back, the voice would stop. When he'd look over, no one was there. That night, I stayed awake until 2:17 a.m., staring at the dark windows, waiting for the voice. It came again, soft and almost human, from behind the fence outside my window. It said my name, slow and careful. I felt ice run through my veins. I didn't move. Then silence. I turned on every light in the house. I wanted to call the police again, but stopped myself. They would think I was losing it. The following morning, I went outside to check the fence. There were muddy footprints near the back gate, too big to be mine, leading toward the alley and then disappearing. I couldn't take it anymore. I packed a small bag and decided to leave Sacramento for a few days, stay with my cousin in Fresno. Before I left, I walked through each room one last time, checking locks and closing curtains. When I got to the spare room, I noticed the closet door was slightly open again. I didn't remember leaving it like that. Inside, everything was gone. The blanket, the bags, the food, gone. The smell of dust and something sour hung in the air. On the wall, scratched deep into the wood, was one last symbol, a circle with a line through it. I shut the door, walked out, and locked up. As I drove away, I glanced at the upstairs window in the mirror. For just a moment, I thought I saw a shape standing there watching me leave. A few nights later, while at my cousin's place, I woke to the sound of a soft thud from the next room. My breath stopped. I sat up slowly, heart pounding. It was the same sound, the same rhythm. I turned on the light, telling myself it couldn't be real. I wasn't in Sacramento anymore. But the next morning, my cousin asked if I'd been outside during the night because his car had 3 small scratches across the dashboard, fresh and deep. I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say. Days passed, and the symbols kept showing up wherever I went. On glass, wood, mirrors, always the same. I tried to ignore them, tried to live normally, but it felt like something had followed me from that house, something that had been hiding there long before I noticed. Sometimes I wonder if the person who lived in that closet ever left, or if they found a way to stay with me, just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to make another sound in the dark. Even now, late at night, when the city is silent and the air turns cold, I still hear that same faint thud. Always once, never twice. And I know it's a reminder that something in Sacramento still remembers me. I remember that night so clearly it still crawls under my skin whenever I think about it. The wind, the cold, and that sound of someone's boots crushing snow outside my front door, like they knew my name but didn't want to say it. It had been a strange winter for Long Beach, a town that rarely saw snow. Yet that December, a violent storm rolled across California's coast and covered everything in white. People said it was a record-breaking cold wave. Others said it felt like the world had shifted off its axis. I didn't care much for what people said, I just knew it was freezing. My name is Maya Brooks, and I had moved to Long Beach about a year before that night. I was a graphic designer, working mostly from home for a small company that made posters and book covers. It wasn't a glamorous life, but it paid enough for rent and coffee. I liked the quiet, I liked being alone, and I thought I understood what peace felt like, until that night showed me what real fear was. It started simple. The storm began around 7:45 p.m., winds howling through the gaps of my old windows. The street outside was empty. My small house sat near the edge of town, a few blocks from the beach. That night, I stayed inside, wrapped in my blanket with my favorite comfort show playing on the TV. The lights were dim, and the world outside was just a blur of white and wind. I was half asleep on the couch when I heard it. Footsteps, slow and heavy, crunching on snow outside my front porch. At first, I thought it was one of my neighbors. Maybe someone looking for help, but the sound was wrong. The steps didn't hesitate like someone lost would. They were calm, steady, too deliberate. My eyes opened. The TV light flickered across the room. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. I didn't move. I waited for a knock. Nothing, just silence, thick and heavy, pressing against my chest. Then I heard a faint shift, like they stepped off the porch. 1, 2, and gone. I sat there, staring at the door. My heart was pounding. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was just the wind throwing things around, or maybe someone taking shelter for a second before moving on. But curiosity has always been a dangerous thing for me. I got up and walked to the window. The snow was wild, swirling so thick that I could barely see past the porch. Still, I could make out something faint shoe prints. They led off the steps, but not toward the street. They stopped halfway across the yard and then just vanished, like whoever it was had walked straight into the storm and dissolved into it. I went around the house checking the side windows and the back door. Nothing. The snow looked untouched. I tried to shake off the unease. Maybe I just imagined more than what was really there. I went back to the couch, covered myself again, and tried to focus on the TV. The familiar sounds brought me a little comfort, and slowly, I began to drift off again. When I opened my eyes, the TV screen was dark. The clock on it showed 2:17 a.m. The storm outside hadn't slowed. It had grown louder. The wind didn't sound muffled anymore. It sounded sharp, close, like it was right next to me. That's when I noticed something wrong with the air. It felt cold, too cold. I could almost see my breath. I turned my head toward the living room light switch, and my stomach twisted. The front door was wide open. Snow poured in, melting on the wooden floor, forming puddles that glistened under the dim light. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I got up. The wind howled through the doorway, and I could see boot prints inside the house, wet, dark, and fresh, leading from the entrance toward the hallway. I froze. My mind raced. Was someone still here? I took one cautious step backward and grabbed my phone from the table. My fingers were shaking so badly that I almost dropped it. The boot prints continued down the hallway, stopping near my bedroom door. Then, faintly, I thought I saw something else. Another set of prints, smaller, as if made by bare feet beside the larger ones, side by side. My throat went dry. I locked myself in the bathroom and called the police. My voice cracked as I explained what happened. They said a patrol was already in my area because of the storm, and they'd be there soon. Those minutes felt endless. Every creak, every gust of wind, every sound made me think someone was on the other side of the door. When the officers arrived, I heard them shouting from outside. I opened the bathroom door, my legs trembling. They checked the house from top to bottom. No one was there. The officers said the tracks inside were confusing. They came in, but there were no clear ones going out. He told me maybe the snow had covered them when the wind shifted. I wanted to believe him. I really did. After they left, I couldn't sleep. I stayed up until morning, shaking, wrapped in my blanket like a shield. I tried to forget it, tried to make sense of something senseless. But the worst part came later. The next day, when the storm cleared a little, I stepped outside to look at the yard. The snow was deep and clean except for a few melted holes. But when I went to my car, parked by the curb, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Someone had written words on the passenger side window, drawn into the frost with a finger. "You are being followed." I stepped back. My breath caught. The words were faint but real. My mind told me to run, to call the police again, to do something, but a strange calmness came over me. Maybe it was denial, maybe shock. I rubbed off the message with my glove, got in the car, and drove to the nearby beach. The ocean looked dead under the pale sky, the sand hidden under frost. I walked close to the waterline. The air was bitter. The waves crashed slow, heavy. That's when I saw it, an old glass bottle stuck in the ice near the rocks. Inside was a piece of paper rolled tight. My heart pounded as I opened it. The handwriting was shaky, almost desperate. It read, "You are being followed." I dropped it. I looked around, scanning the beach, but there was no one. Only the wind, only the endless gray sea. Something inside me broke then. I rushed back to the car, slammed the doors, locked them, and tried to calm down. My reflection stared back from the rear-view mirror, pale, frightened. Then, just for a moment, I saw movement in the side mirror. A woman's face, standing behind the car. I turned instantly, but no one was there. My breath fogged the glass. I waited. I stared. Nothing, just the sound of waves crashing. For the next few nights, I didn't leave the house. I couldn't. I kept every light on. I barely ate. Every sound outside felt like footsteps. Every shadow looked like someone watching. The cops said there had been a few break-ins that week, but nothing else connected to mine. They thought it was just a drifter, someone looking for food or shelter. But I knew better, because every night since then, at exactly 2:17 a.m., I'd hear footsteps outside again. Same rhythm, same weight. Coming to the door, stopping. Then silence. I started keeping a knife under my pillow. I even set up a small camera near the porch. But when I checked the footage the next morning, all I could see was static and snow. No movement, no figure, no sound except that strange hum like whispering wind. A week later, the storm came back. This time, worse. The whole town shut down. I stayed inside again, TV on, trying to act normal. But deep down, I could feel it. Something was building, waiting. That night, as I lay on the couch again, I heard a thump near the window. I sat up. Another thump. I turned the light off and looked outside. A dark shape moved through the snow, circling the house. My chest tightened. It was too tall to be human. Its movements were too slow, too smooth. Then it stopped right in front of the porch light, and for the first time, I saw its face, or rather, the lack of one. It looked like a person, but the skin was pale and stretched thin, the eyes just hollow shadows, the mouth hanging slightly open as if frozen mid-scream. It turned its head slowly, like it was listening to something. Then, it stepped forward. I backed away, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. The front door rattled once, twice, then stopped. I could feel the cold creeping through the air, like invisible fingers brushing my skin. I grabbed my phone, but the screen was black, no signal. Then came the sound again, footsteps, inside the house this time. I froze. The air was thick with dread. My mind screamed to run, but my legs refused. I could hear the sound moving through the hall, the same rhythm, same heavy boots. I whispered to myself, praying it was just a dream. The steps stopped near the living room. Then, a voice. Faint, almost like the wind itself. Maya. I covered my mouth. My heart stuttered. It was my name. Whispered from the dark. I turned toward the sound, my eyes searching for any movement. The shape was there, standing in the doorway. It didn't move closer, just stared. The air seemed to hum around it. Then, the lights flickered. For one brief second, the room filled with white static light, and I saw it clearly. Its eyes were mirrors, reflecting me, showing me lying on the couch, asleep, just like the night it entered before. When the light went out, the shape was gone. The door creaked, the wind screamed. I felt a chill behind me and turned slowly toward the side window. In the glass reflection, behind me, was her face. The same hollow expression, the same frozen scream. I spun around. Nothing. My phone flickered to life for a second. The screen showed the time 2:17 a.m. That was the last thing I remembered before everything went black. When I woke up, daylight poured through the broken windows. Snow covered half the living room. The police said they found me passed out near the couch. The front door was wide open again. The tracks in the snow didn't make sense. They came from the ocean. Straight to my door. I tried to move out after that. Packed everything. Left Long Beach. But sometimes, even now when I'm driving late at night, I still see her. In my side mirror. She's always there, standing behind the car, never closer, never farther, just watching. And sometimes, when I'm parked by the beach, I find bottles in the sand again. Each one has a note inside. Every single one says the same thing. You are being followed. I never believed small towns could hold big secrets. Not until that winter when I learned what fear really felt like. I still hear that knock in my dreams, soft at first, then harder, like someone testing the silence of my house just to see if I was listening. It was the week before Christmas in Oakland, California. The town looked peaceful, the sky gray and heavy with rain, the streets quiet except for the wind dragging leaves across the sidewalks. People hung lights on their porches and smiled when they passed, but their eyes always looked a little tired, like they knew something I didn't. I was 16, an only child, living with my parents in a small yellow house on the edge of town, near a cluster of old oak trees that bent low over the road. My dad worked as a mechanic, and my mom managed a small diner near the pier. They both worked long hours, so most days I had the house to myself. I'd always liked being alone. My friends said I was weird for it, but quiet didn't scare me. It felt like freedom. Or at least it used to. That Tuesday morning started like any other. My parents left just before 8:15 a.m., reminding me to lock the doors and stay inside. I nodded, half listening, already thinking about the game I wanted to play. When their car pulled out of the driveway, the house felt instantly hollow, the way it always did after they left. I ran upstairs to my room, booted up my PC, and slipped on my headset. The glow from my monitor filled the room with soft blue light, and I lost track of everything else. Time, hunger, sound. Then came the knock. It was faint, just 2 taps at first, like someone testing the wood. I froze, headset still around my neck. Another knock followed, louder this time. I didn't move. The knocking stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than before, as if the air itself was waiting. I held my breath and listened, but nothing came after that. I told myself it was just a delivery, or maybe a neighbor. I didn't answer. After a few minutes, I slipped my headset back on and forced myself to focus on the game. Hours passed. I didn't even realize it. When I finally checked the time, it was 1:42 p.m. I went downstairs to make breakfast, even though it was already the afternoon. As I walked past the front door, I noticed the lock was open. My heart jumped a little. My parents never forgot to lock it, and they always used the garage anyway. I pushed the bolt down and shook my head, blaming myself for probably forgetting earlier. In the kitchen, I poured cereal into a bowl, added milk, and leaned against the counter. The quiet was thick, only broken by the hum of the fridge and the soft patter of rain against the windows. I went back upstairs, bowl in hand, and kept playing. A few minutes later, I felt my desk tremble. Just once, a quick vibration, like someone had slammed a door downstairs. I pulled off my headset. Silence. I walked to the door and looked down the hallway. The light from my room stretched halfway down before fading into shadow. I waited, trying to hear anything. The heater, the wind, a door creaking. Nothing. I told myself it was the air system. Still, my pulse wouldn't calm down. I crept to the top of the stairs, leaned over the railing, and looked down. The living room was dim. For a second, I thought I saw something move, a shadow near the bottom of the steps. My breath caught in my throat. The shadow stopped. It was like whoever it was had noticed me watching. I couldn't move. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, staring into the half-dark. Then the shadow shifted again. I heard slow, careful footsteps moving toward the back of the house. The back door creaked open, then it shut. That sound broke me. I ran to my parents' room, locked the door, grabbed the old landline from the bedside table, and dialed 911 with shaking hands. The police came fast, 5 minutes, maybe less. When they searched the house, they didn't find anyone. No broken windows, no forced entry, no footprints except mine. They said maybe someone had tried the door and ran when they realized I was home. But I knew what I saw. That shadow wasn't outside. It had been in the house. That night, my parents came home early. They checked every lock twice, comforted me, and told me not to worry. Still, something felt wrong. The next morning when I woke up, my gaming chair was turned toward the window. I never left it that way. At first, I thought maybe I just forgot, but then I noticed something else. My toy soldier, the one I'd kept since I was little, was sitting on my desk instead of the shelf. It was facing me. I didn't tell my parents. Each night after that, small things started to change. My toy would move again, sometimes to my desk, sometimes to the top of my PC tower. Once, I found it on my pillow. I set up my webcam one night, pointing it at the shelf before I went to sleep. When I watched the footage the next morning, I almost dropped my phone. At 2:17 a.m., the toy moved. Not fast, not with a fall. It slid. Like someone's hand had gently set it down somewhere else. And for a split second, just before it moved, I saw something behind it. A shape. A human shape. I ran to my parents and showed them. They said the footage was probably glitched, light distortion or something. My dad even deleted it, trying to calm me down. But the next night, the toy wasn't there. It was in the hallway, sitting upright against my bedroom door. By Friday, I barely slept. Every creak sounded like footsteps. Every shadow looked alive. I kept the lights on and my phone next to me, ready to call the police again if I had to. That night, it started raining harder than I'd ever seen. The wind made the house groan. My parents texted that they'd be home late because of flooded roads. I tried to distract myself with a movie, but the power flickered twice and then went out completely. The house fell into silence. I grabbed my flashlight and checked the hallway. Everything was still. But when I aimed the light down the stairs, I saw the front door was wide open. Rain blew in, soaking the floor. I stepped down slowly, my socks slipping on the wet wood. When I reached the door, I looked out, nothing but darkness and the faint orange glow of the streetlights through the rain. I closed and locked it, but before I turned around, I heard a voice behind me. "You came back. I waited for you." It was a man's voice, deep but quiet, standing right behind my shoulder. I spun around, the flashlight beam shaking in my hand. Nobody. Just the empty hallway, dripping rainwater and the faint hum of the fridge restarting as the power flickered back on. My breath came fast, my throat tight. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, there was a package on the doorstep. No address, no name, just a plain brown cover soaked from the rain. I opened it on the kitchen table. Inside was an old diary. The first page had one line written in black ink. "I'm choosing the right time to enter your home." I dropped it and ran outside, scanning the yard, the street, every window across the road. Nothing. My parents didn't believe me anymore. They said someone was pulling a prank, maybe a neighbor kid. My dad installed a small CCTV camera above the front door to make me feel safer. That night, the toy didn't move. I actually thought maybe things were ending, until the next morning when my mom screamed. She'd been checking the camera feed. At 3:34 a.m., the door had opened. A tall figure stepped inside, head low, moving slow. He walked straight past the camera, like he knew exactly where it was. He went down the hall toward my room. He was in the house for 42 minutes. The police checked again, but the footage didn't help. The man's face was hidden, his steps silent. There were no signs of forced entry, no damage, no prints. They started asking questions about me instead, if I'd let someone in, if I'd staged it. That hurt. I wasn't crazy. After that night, my parents wouldn't leave me home alone. But work kept them out late, and they couldn't afford to stop. So they locked every door, every window, and promised to check in every hour. One evening, around 7:45 p.m., I was on my computer doing homework when I heard a thump from the closet. Not a fall, more like something shifting inside. I stood up slowly, my skin cold. The closet door was closed, but the slats in it let me see thin lines of darkness between them. I stared for a long time, and then something inside moved again. I reached for the handle, my fingers trembling. Before I could touch it, I heard whispering from inside. Faint, almost like breathing words. "You shouldn't have looked." I stumbled back, heart pounding. I ran downstairs, out the front door, and into the rain before I even realized I was barefoot. I stood in the driveway, staring up at my window. The light in my room turned off. Someone was inside. The police came again, but the house was empty when they searched it. My parents begged them to stay longer, but they had other calls. That night, my mom made me sleep in their room. We tried to pretend everything was normal after that, but I couldn't stop checking over my shoulder. I started keeping a small knife under my pillow, even though I knew it wouldn't help. Then came the last night. It was 3 days before Christmas. The rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung low over the houses. My parents left for their shifts around 7 in the morning, promising to be back before dark. I watched them drive away from the window, feeling something in my chest twist. I turned on the lights, checked every lock twice, and sat at my desk. I tried to game, to keep my mind busy, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. At noon, I heard the mail slot open. A single envelope slid through and hit the floor. My name wasn't on it. Inside was a single photo of me, sitting at my desk, taken from behind. My computer screen in the picture showed the same game I was playing. The timestamp in the corner read 11:59 a.m. 1 minute ago. The air left my body. I ran to the window and looked outside. No one. When I turned back, my chair was turned toward the door. I stepped back, heart hammering. The toy soldier was sitting on the chair now, its tiny face pointed at me. The diary was open on my desk again, a new line written on the second page. I'm already inside. That was when I heard footsteps behind me, slow, heavy, deliberate. I didn't turn around. The sound came closer, stopping right behind my shoulder, just like before. Then the man's voice whispered again, "You came back. I waited for you." I turned around. No one was there. Just the window, half open, the curtains swaying with the wind. I ran out of the house, straight to the neighbors, barefoot and shaking. When the police arrived again, the house was empty, no signs of entry. No diary, no toy, no toy. Everything was back in place, like it had never happened. But I know what I saw. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear that voice when I try to sleep. I've moved towns now, but I keep a camera in every room. Last week, I woke up to check one of the feeds. At 2:17 a.m., the toy soldier was sitting in front of my bedroom door again. I had no idea that one winter night in Bakersfield would stay with me forever, like a scar carved into my memory. I used to work at a 24-hour gas station on the quiet side of town, near the farmlands where fog rolled across the road after midnight. My name is Ray, and back then, I was just another guy trying to make ends meet. I wasn't from Bakersfield originally, but the small town had a strange pull. It was peaceful, quiet, and a little too still when the sun went down. It started during my first winter working there. Nights were long and cold, and traffic on the highway almost stopped after 1 in the morning. That's when I met a regular named Daniel. He was a trucker who stopped by nearly every night for coffee, snacks, or gas. Always cheerful, always smiling, but there was something about that smile that made me uneasy. It stretched too far, like it was stuck on his face. He'd chat about his deliveries, the road, and how lonely driving could be. I'd laugh along, but deep down his grin unsettled me. He looked happy, but his eyes told another story. They were empty, like the lights were on, but no one was inside. One night, close to 2:17 a.m., he came in as usual, but this time his energy was off. He greeted me, but his voice cracked. He wandered through the aisles without looking up, his face hard and strange, like he was somewhere else in his mind. When he reached the counter, he smiled again, that same wide grin, yet I saw dread behind it, a silent panic trying to hide. He paid for his drink, nodded, and walked out to his truck. I didn't think much of it until the next night when he came back. Snow fell that evening, dusting the roads in thin white sheets. The store was empty when Daniel pulled in. His steps were heavy, his smile gone. He grabbed an energy drink and came up to pay. This time he asked, almost in a whisper, how busy the night had been and when my shift ended. Then he asked if I could help him lift something heavy from his truck. I hesitated, but I'd known him for months, so I agreed. I threw on my jacket and followed him outside. The parking lot was quiet except for the hum of streetlights. His truck was parked on the far side near the empty fields. The night air was sharp and the ground was wet from melting snow. Daniel opened the passenger door and gestured for me to get in. He said the load was in the back and that he'd follow behind me. I climbed up into the cab, the smell of diesel filling my nose. Behind the seats was a metal door leading to the cargo area. He pointed at it and said, "It's right in there, man. I'll be right behind you." Something about his tone made my chest tighten. My hands started shaking. I turned to glance at him, and that's when I saw it. His smile again, stretched wide, too wide. But his eyes, they weren't just empty anymore. They looked terrified. Then I smelled it. A horrible stench leaking from behind the cargo door. It wasn't oil or fuel. It was the smell of rot, of something long dead. My gut screamed at me to run. I climbed down fast, muttering something about forgetting my gloves, and shut the door hard. The moment it slammed, Daniel shouted something, a harsh, frustrated sound, then silence. I rushed back to the gas station, my heart pounding. Through the glass, I saw him sitting in the cab, staring toward the station. Then he started the truck, turned onto the highway, and vanished into the darkness. That was the last time I saw Daniel. Weeks went by. The memory of that night stuck in my head like a splinter, but life went on. I kept working. The snow melted, spring came, and the world seemed normal again. Until the strange things started happening around the gas station. It began with footsteps. Every night, around 3 in the morning, I'd hear them outside, slow and steady, circling the pumps. But when I stepped out to check, the snow showed no footprints. Just silence. The manager said it was probably the wind or raccoons, but I knew better. I could feel the presence, heavy and near. Then one morning, a farmer from down the road came in, pale and shaken. He told me he'd been hearing footsteps on his land too, every night, right outside his barn. But the soil never showed any tracks. His animals wouldn't go near that side of the fence anymore. A few days later, a girl came by the bus stop across from the station every morning, waiting for her ride to school. One day, an old man started showing up too. He'd stand near her, never saying much, just staring. Then one morning, I heard him whisper to her, "Don't go home today." I watched from inside as the girl froze, grabbed her bag, and walked away quickly. The old man disappeared after that. She never came back to that stop again. The town grew quieter. People stopped coming out after dark. Something was wrong with Bakersfield that winter, and I could feel it in my bones. Then came the holes. It started behind my rented house, fresh holes appearing in the backyard every morning, as if someone had been digging during the night. They weren't animal holes. They were too wide, too deep, like someone was searching for something. One night I stayed awake to watch. Around 2:41 a.m., I saw a shadow moving by the back fence. It was tall, hunched, and slow. My breath caught as it turned its head toward me. Even from a distance, I could see that same awful grin, wide, broken, stretched too far. It was Daniel, or something that wore his face. I ran inside, locked every door, and didn't sleep until sunrise. The next evening, when I came to work, the gas station felt colder. The air had a strange stillness, and the hum of the refrigerator seemed quieter. Around 3 in the morning, I went outside to take out the trash, and I saw a trail of wet boot prints leading toward the back of the lot. They stopped right beside the storage shed. My hands shook as I opened the door, and the smell hit me again. That same sour, rotten odor I'd smelled in Daniel's truck. Inside was nothing but darkness, but I could hear something breathing, slow and shallow. I backed away, shut the door, and ran back to the station. The cameras showed nothing, no prints, no person, no truck. But I could still smell that decay on my clothes. After that night, everything around me began to twist. The town itself seemed to rot. People whispered about missing pets, about open fields where the ground looked freshly turned every morning. The farmers' cows went missing one by one. A few nights later, near closing time, I was restocking shelves when the lights flickered. The power didn't go out completely, just enough for the shadows to move wrong. I looked toward the glass doors, and my blood froze. Daniel stood outside. His grin stretched wide, eyes lifeless, skin pale like snow. He raised one hand and tapped on the glass, slow, rhythmic, like he was counting. I couldn't move. I just stared. His other hand pointed toward the parking lot, the same truck parked there in the dark. I backed away, heart racing, reaching for the phone. When I looked again, he was gone. The lot was empty. I quit the job 2 days later. But even now, years later, I still dream of that night. Sometimes I wake up at exactly 3:17 a.m., hearing footsteps outside my window. Last month, I went back to Bakersfield to visit my cousin. The gas station is gone now, replaced by a car wash. But when I stopped to look, I noticed something behind it. A patch of ground that looked recently disturbed, soil uneven like something had been dug up. I asked a worker there if they'd found anything while clearing the land. He laughed and said they kept finding old bones, maybe from animals, maybe not. Then he told me something that made my heart stop. He said a trucker's body had been discovered years ago in that very spot, sealed inside a rusted cargo truck buried under the old parking lot. The locals never found who killed him. That night when I drove back home, I passed the fields where the farmer used to live. The moonlight stretched across the road, pale and cold. Then I saw it again, a figure standing near the ditch, smiling that same hollow smile, eyes black and gleaming. As I sped away, I caught a glimpse in my mirror. The back seat wasn't empty anymore. A faint smell of rot filled the air, and I heard a whisper, soft and trembling. "It's right in there, Ray. I'll follow behind you." I was never the type to believe that small towns could hide something evil, but I was wrong. I was heading to my family's house in Riverside for Christmas, driving across the country with my little dachshund, Milo. Flying wasn't an option. He hated loud noises, and I couldn't leave him behind. The first part of the trip was easy, quiet highways and clear skies. But when morning came for the second half, I woke up to a white world buried under heavy snow. The wind howled outside my motel window, shaking the glass as if warning me not to go. Still, I packed my bags and told myself I could outrun the storm. I started the car. Milo curled on the seat beside me, his small body trembling under his blanket. We drove for hours, the snow thickening, the road disappearing beneath us. I checked the clock. It was 2:17 p.m. and realized I'd never make it to Riverside by nightfall. The sky was turning darker, the wind louder. I needed a place to stop. There were no towns, no stores, just white land stretching forever. When I finally saw a cracked sign that read Silver Pines Motel, I felt relief rush through me. The sign flickered weakly in the storm. I turned in, tires crunching over ice. The parking lot was almost empty except for one old car half covered in snow. The building looked abandoned, its windows black, one of the letters missing from the sign above the door. I left the engine running for Milo's warmth and stepped out into the freezing air. The snow stung my face as I made my way to the entrance. The door was locked. I wiped away the frost from the glass, trying to peek inside. It was dark, no movement, no sound. Just the reflection of my own pale face staring back. Then I heard Milo barking. Loud, desperate barks that echoed off the icy air. I turned fast, my heart thudding. 2 men were walking through the snow toward my car. Their shapes were tall, shadows moving wrong under the dim lights. I stepped back from the door, my breath turning to fog. "Hey," one of them called, his voice strained, too friendly. "Is the place open?" I shook my head. "No, looks closed." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's too bad. Think you could help us?" "Our car's acting up. Maybe you got some gas?" Every word felt rehearsed. I said I couldn't help and started to walk around them, but they moved closer, slow and deliberate. My pulse kicked. Milo was barking nonstop, scratching the glass inside the car. I took a wide path around, pretending to stay calm, my boots sliding over the snow. When I reached my door and slammed it shut, the sound cracked through the storm. I locked it immediately. The men's faces appeared at my window, their breath fogging the glass. One of them kept knocking, steady and slow. "Come on, miss," he said. "We just need a little help." The way he said it made every hair on my neck rise. Milo whimpered, pressing against my leg. I didn't answer. I just reversed fast, snow spraying behind me, and drove back to the road. The headlights cut through the dark and falling snow. My hands shook as I dialed the highway patrol to report the men. 10 minutes later, the officer called back. He said they checked the motel lot. No men, no car. Nothing. I should have felt safe, but instead, a chill deeper than the storm crawled through me. How could they just vanish like that? The storm didn't let up. I drove another 30 miles before spotting a small diner with a flickering neon sign. The parking lot was full of snowdrifts, but the lights inside were on. I parked and went in, Milo tucked under my jacket. The air smelled like burnt coffee. An old woman behind the counter looked up. "You out in this storm?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, trying to get to Riverside. "Stopped at a motel back there," but her eyes narrowed. "Silver Pines?" I nodded. "That place has been closed 10 years now," she said softly. "Burned down after a murder." Whole family found in their rooms. My throat went dry. I looked down at Milo, his eyes wide and alert. She kept talking, voice low. "Folks still see people walking near it sometimes asking for help." I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just thanked her and left. When I stepped outside, my car lights flickered by themselves. For a second, I thought I saw shapes moving behind the fogged windows. I opened the door, and Milo barked toward the back seat. It was empty, or at least it looked that way. I brushed off the snow and tried to convince myself it was nothing. When I got to Riverside, it was near midnight. The snow had eased, leaving the streets silent and wet. My parents' old house sat at the end of the road, Christmas lights twinkling faintly. Inside, warmth wrapped around me. I fed Milo and tried to forget the motel. But that night, as I unpacked, my phone rang. No number, just unknown. I answered, heart pounding. A voice whispered, "When will you turn your bedroom light off?" The line went dead. I stared at the phone, then at the window. The curtains were open, facing the dark backyard. I pulled them shut fast, my hands trembling. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I tried to shake it off as a prank call. I helped my mom decorate and pretended everything was normal. But that night, the call came again. Same voice, same question. "When will you turn your bedroom light off?" I hung up and turned my phone off, but around 3 in the morning, Milo started growling. I woke up and saw the red light blinking on my answering machine. I pressed play. The voice whispered. I waited. I didn't know what that meant. The next day, I tried to distract myself, took Milo on a walk around the block. At the corner, we passed an old house with a porch full of junk. Something caught my eye, a vintage camera sitting on the steps, half buried in dust. Curiosity pulled me closer. I picked it up. Inside was a memory card. That night, I plugged it into my laptop. There were dozens of short video clips. Each one showed different houses, filmed at night from the outside. Every window, every room lit faintly. My stomach turned when I saw one that looked familiar, my parents' house. The last clip stopped on my window. The timestamp said last night. My hands shook. I unplugged the camera, turned off the lights, and sat in silence. Milo whined softly, pacing near the door. The phone rang again. Unknown number. I didn't answer. But a few seconds later, a knock echoed through the house. Slow. Steady. I crept toward the door, each sound of my heartbeat louder than the last. I looked through the peephole. Nothing. Just darkness and snow. Another knock. Then a whisper, right outside. "When will you turn your bedroom light off?" I stumbled back. Milo barked wildly. My parents ran downstairs, confused. But when we opened the door, no one was there, just footprints leading into the woods behind the house. We called the police. They searched, but found nothing. The next few nights passed in uneasy quiet. I tried to tell myself it was over, that maybe someone was playing a sick joke. Then one morning, I found something carved into my bedroom wall. I waited. The same words from the voicemail. The letters were uneven, fresh. I hadn't heard anything during the night, yet someone had been inside. I couldn't stay there. I packed up, loaded Milo into the car, and drove out of Riverside. I didn't even tell my family where I was going. I just needed to leave. But even as I drove down the highway, snow melting on the sides, The phone started ringing again. I looked at the screen. "Unknown," I answered, voice shaking. "Who is this?" A pause, then a quiet breath. "You shouldn't have left." The line cut off. I threw the phone onto the seat, my heart hammering. The sun was setting, the sky bleeding orange over the hills. I thought I was alone until I noticed the reflection in my rearview mirror. A figure sitting in the back seat. I slammed the brakes, the car skidding on the wet road. When I turned around, the seat was empty. Milo was whimpering. I looked back at the mirror. No one there now. I drove until I saw a small rest stop and pulled in, shaking. I tried to calm down, telling myself it was my mind playing tricks after too many sleepless nights. I leaned back, eyes heavy, Milo pressed close against me. When I woke up, it was still dark. The clock read 4:12 a.m. The air inside the car felt colder. My phone buzzed. One new message. It was a photo. A picture of me sleeping, taken through the windshield. My breath caught. I looked outside, empty lot, shadows stretching long under the dim lights, but I knew someone was out there watching. The next day, I drove until the storm was behind me. I stopped in a new town, far from Riverside, far from that motel. I found another cheap place to stay. When I entered the room, I turned the lights on and closed the curtains tight. For a moment, I almost felt safe, until the phone on the nightstand rang. The same voice whispered, softer this time, almost sad. "When will you turn your bedroom light off?" I looked at Milo. His ears twitched, eyes wide, staring at something behind me. The air shifted, cold creeping along my spine. I turned slowly toward the mirror above the bed. Behind my reflection stood the two men from the motel.